Welcome to a true spiritual adventure story like the world has never known with your host, Dr. James Yogadi Weldon. Good day, this is Dr. Jim Weldon speaking to you from Heavenly Mountain in Boone, North Carolina. Our community, which is dedicated to bridging the gaps of our understanding between the different traditions of the world, in talking about the way to live a divine life. This is part of my ongoing series, Surprising, the story behind the greatest story ever told, memories from the life of Jesus. And I mentioned that because that's how it appeared to me. That's how it came to me. How this is possible and how it all began takes a little explaining. Many years ago, in a very advanced high state of consciousness known as Turia, completely beyond my control, with no intent trying whatsoever, I began to see in that deep state, in the early morning, scenes from the life of Jesus. After a couple of days of this happening, one scene after another, I said, I better start writing this down. And so the process began. It's continued actually for over 20 years now. This true spiritual adventure novel became a lifelong work to try to explain the story behind the life of Jesus. Because what we've received in the Bible was only about 2.5 years of his life. If we only shared 2.5 years of your life, would it be a complete story? It would not. We know that as a child, at some point around 12 to 13, he disappeared. And then the story really doesn't take up again until his early 30s, where he reappeared again. So what happened during that time? So I began to see those events, and I really spent many years developing the capability to see these kinds of replays, if you will, trained by the greatest spiritual masters really in the world today. And my teacher long ago gave me a general outline, and I wondered about that for so many years. I felt a very deep and profound connection to Christianity at my first church when I was 13 years old, and we would pray. And I had some very strong experiences, but for me, that wasn't enough. And so step by step of taking me through his life. And today we're continuing that story. He's come back to his homeland. He's met his disciples. He's been baptized. He's met Mary Magdalene, his family, and he's beginning his ministry. He's been rejected by the temple. Yesterday, I talked a little bit about the kinds of individuals that were coming to see him. So today, I want to talk a little bit more specifically about his closest students that came to him and why they came. The first person you might think of, famous, was Judas. There is no doubt that Judas was very close to Jesus. He traveled with him, followed him from place to place for some time. And how could it be that somebody had spent so much time with Jesus would reject him, would abandon him, would betray him? How could that be? Well, yesterday I talked about how there were 3 basic reasons that people came to Jesus. First of all, they were in pain and they were suffering, so they wanted some relief from that. And the second group thought they could benefit from being around and near him. They had something what they wanted to attain, fame or money or power. And then the third group, the highest group, were those that just came to serve. So Judas was in the second category. You know, life was extremely difficult during those times. As I said yesterday, that any person really could be taken from their home with no reason by the Romans and executed often on the spot with no repercussions whatsoever. Living situations were very, very poor. Even a simple cut could be life-threatening. So people didn't live that long. Jewish community rightfully sought to protect their own. So Judas saw all of these different individuals scrambling to stay alive. They literally thought that he was going to try to take over and become a king And so when he talked about the kingdom of heaven is within you, people thought of God as somebody that was up there somewhere. They still do today, maybe in the clouds looking down, judging you, writing down with a script what you're doing, counting every good deed, every bad deed. And at the end of all of this is going to settle the books. Then you go down, and if you're at a higher state, you go up. This is not how it is at all. And all of this was later added on to the essential teachings in the imagination of those individuals that wrote, transcribed the initial stories. So how is it that I can know these things? Well, and it is possible, and we're proving it now with over 100,000 children. We have programs in this organization, the intuition course for children. And we have children that can be blindfolded and can read a book that's across the room. Somebody opens up a book. They're totally blindfolded. Hold it up, they open it up, and the child can read it. Things can be written on the board, and they can, again, blindfolded, they can see those numbers and read those words or see those images. Not everybody, but these are capabilities which are inherent. We have blind children who can ride bicycles down the street, play video games, completely blindfolded. It's pretty fascinating. So my story was that I was one of these children way back. And a lot of these things were happening to me as a child. Frightened me, quite frankly. You should consider looking at my first novel, Living the Enlightened Life, which talks about how that began in my early days. And also, I talk about the education that I went through. Jesus went through a very intensive, long education. In this life, that he was Jesus. And so those abilities are real. And at a certain stage, they can be accurate. And of course, it doesn't mean that anything that comes into your mind is true. So it needs to be validated. It really can be tested. And if you think that you have such capabilities, that's fine. We're in a time where many people are opening to these possibilities. But the question is it 5% accurate or 100% accurate? So I waited many years until my teacher finally said, okay, Dr. Weldon Yogati, now you can trust that insight. And so not only is it capable of giving you the scenes and the events, but you can also feel the feelings. It's all recorded in time space if you're able to connect with that accurately. So Jesus loved Judas, and Judas loved Jesus, but he also had many other things that he wanted. He wanted a family, he wanted a home, he wanted wealth, he wanted prestige. And just like many people in the world, he got lost in the desiring of these instead of the higher teachings that Jesus was trying to point to. And Jesus also did not teach a lot of these advanced methodologies that came from the East that he learned and practiced himself, because the individuals are not ready for that. Even proper prayer or guided meditations, which is really what he did, the knowledge was given by allegories, by stories, also because those are easier to understand. And so when Jesus was betrayed by Judas, he was shocked. He was completely shocked. It wasn't necessarily the case that he would be so cruelly crucified. We'll talk about that a little bit later. He was definitely going to be imprisoned. And so when Judas betrayed him, it was a big shock. He knew essentially what was going to happen, that he was going to be tried, because they had already, of course, by that time, John the Baptist had been murdered. He knew that it was going to be a difficult time, but he had great confidence that he would survive through this, and he did. The repercussions of the effect of this betrayal by Judas not only continued then, but continued into the future. Judas, of course, felt great remorse as he came up and kissed him on the cheek. That was a symbol that he was the person. See, even by that time, they didn't really know in detail exactly who Jesus was. They'd seen him teaching here and there, baptizing, heard stories of him healing, but when the wave of interest from those in power came to consider imprisoning him, they needed a way to determine exactly who he was. And one way to do that was somebody that was close to him and been around him. And so Judas received his silver for doing that, and almost immediately regretted that, and unfortunately almost immediately felt such remorse that he took his own life, sadly. Jesus felt that and knew that when he was going through that. Now, we all feel desperate at certain times in our life, and we feel, okay, maybe it might be better to move on. That's never, ever, ever a solution. This body actually makes the extreme emotions less. And all those individuals that do that, and they do something to destroy the body, they're still there. And it's much stronger. It would be like there's a huge downpour happening and you've got a raincoat protecting you, and it's raining and it's cold. You've got a little bit of a coat, but you're shivering. And then you decide to take off the coat and stand in the rain. The emotions are even stronger. And the repercussions of such an action continue into the future. It's like dropping a rock in a pond. The repercussions of those actions go out and they come back upon us. And this is why we need to be very, very careful about harming other individuals, really harming anybody. But the ripples of Judas continued even to this day, 2,000 years later, because the energies of this universe inevitably create circumstances for our growth and evolution. So it's not that the events in our life are all random. If we've made some mistakes, we pay for those and they come back upon us. But the principle of grace can intercede with that through prayer, but also through deeper meditation. That dissolves some of that, and then a master consciousness can take it on. Literally take that onto himself. And so if you were to think of Judas, who had committed suicide, well, we take a time for rest, but we get back in line and we come back again. And then another circumstances is created, maybe around the same people. Often they are, but even so, similar circumstance comes, he has an opportunity to make a choice. Sometimes we don't make the right choice. It can become worse. But as we grow and develop over centuries through this, Judas might find himself in a business, let's say in our time, and in that business, be close to one or more of these beings, even Jesus himself, who has come back to do a job. And then he would again have an opportunity to betray him, and will he or will he not? So it may not result in suicide, but it will result in a lot of suffering. So the suffering that we pass through, we bring upon ourselves. And this must be how it is. So this is something to think about, and to be around such individuals in such communities that have a deeper understanding of what is going on in this life. What's the story behind the story in our life? My first two novels are really about trying to explain what that is. My personal life really being a living document of the potentialities of consciousness and all the different experiences you could pass through. Those first two novels, which I wrote just because I was so amazed at what I passed through, have turned out to be validation to help people understand that there may be some truth in this. I make no claims whatsoever. I am explaining exactly what I experienced, and people are welcome to make their own conclusion. And so there were a group of individuals who were looking for something they could gain by being around Jesus. And you remember that even as a child, there's a story of his being able to read the crookedness of some of the people in his community. That's why he had to leave on the Black Sea and went to India. He was told by the three wise men that that was a journey that he needed to make for his education. But also he told one of the merchants that this individual was pretty crooked and was looking to destroy his business and take over. And when he told him, he helped that merchant, but the individual in power didn't like that and was looking for revenge. Everything we do to everybody comes back on us. Every thought, every word, every deed. It's kind of scary in a sense, because you really can't control directly the thoughts that you have. You think you can. You don't really directly control the actions either. What's the next thought going to be? You don't know. What's the next action going to be? You don't know. Really, we are rivers of life. The more connected we are, the easier the path is. We have to go through our lessons. We have to do the inner work. Each individual must do that for themselves. But being around high-minded individuals is how I make great progress in my life. I came to the point that I could really do this with confidence, that it's good and useful. And this is maybe unique to the West, but it's actually not unique to some of the cultures in the East. They have great stories of the lives of some of the masters of those times. Edgar Cayce, one of the first deep and intuitive seers earlier this century, was able to do some of this and to do healings and do readings for individuals. And his major center is actually not far from where I live here in Boone, North Carolina. So there were a group of individuals who were looking to gain something from being around Jesus. And then the vast majority were just looking for a way to ease their suffering, just to be around and in the locality where he was. The idea of the baptism and to take up a new life was a practice that John the Baptist did, and Jesus began to do some of that as well. But the real washing that he was looking for in the cleansing was the spirit, by being in the presence of such a high energy. And secretly, he was taking on the weight of the suffering of the people. And it was a small group. It wasn't a big group. It wasn't like he would walk in somewhere and thousands of people. It was never like that. Most of those meetings were done in houses, and a few of the teachings were done out in the open area. He was giving away food sometimes. There were healings that were going on. There were blessings that were going on. And ultimately, when the difficult trials and tribulations happened, they happened because those individuals in power began to sense that he was challenging their positions. He didn't want to take over, obviously, and create a kingdom there, but those individuals that are around him, he talk about the kingdom of heaven, and they would just interpret those words to mean, oh, he's going to challenge the Romans. He's going to free the people. But even if that did happen and the people were the same, they wouldn't be freed. We think that if we get the things that we want in our mind, that it will make a huge difference. It won't really. So many things you desired as a child and growing up, you look forward to that, and then after those things happen, you were really the same. Because it's the inner life that really makes the difference. We are seeking something that's beyond any attainment we could have in this whole world. So one of the things he said, what if you were to have the whole world and to lose your soul? Would that be worth it? This entire planet belonged to you, everything on it. Would you be fulfilled? No. If all the praises of all the leaders of this world were heaped upon you, would you feel fulfilled? No. Anything you can imagine happening in the exterior over and over again. And I've met with national leaders of countries around the world with my teacher traveling around. They spend the entire life trying to climb to this position, struggling so hard. And a lot of times compromising their integrity, doing things that they wouldn't normally feel to do. And when they get there, they're trapped. They can't even go out without guards watching every move. So the true freedom is within. Doesn't mean anything you want to attain, go ahead and have that. But if you think at the end of that, that you're going to have the great fulfillment as a result of that, you will not. because that is a state of life within you. And it requires proper education to culture that and develop that. Good friends, good community, high teachings, and take the things that you've learned. And I took the things that I learned as a child from the Christian church. I had very strong experiences. Everything that's been talked about that happens in the church, the speaking in tongues and all of that, you know, and feeling great love. And that happened to us. That happened in our little bitty church that I had in Cocoa Beach, Florida. But it wasn't enough. And I was ready to totally commit myself to that. I went to my mother when I was 13 or 14 years old after one of these, and I said, I'm leaving school. I'm leaving. I'm going to go preach the Bible. And fortunately, she said, well, just wait a little bit. Once in a meeting with my teacher, and this gentleman now has helped hundreds of millions of individuals. His name is Sri Ravi Shankar. We were sitting in a meeting and he was talking about some of this. Well, I said to him, well, I used to be a preacher. And he turned and he looked at me and he said, used to be? Used to be? Yeah. So, you know, when we have something great and we're living that, we only want to give it away. If you want to do good in the world, if you want to help this beautiful planet, which is really part of us, this is our body. You could say the mother lives here. We came from the earth. If you want to help awaken this planet and to help us deal with all the problems, if we fix all the surface problems, will the world be happy and complete? No. That state must be lived, but it's a group phenomenon. And as many individuals right now in this time in the world are moving into that higher consciousness, are maturing, there's an awakening that's going on. That's what's happening now. And I'm telling you, my dear friends, that is connected to the story that I'm sharing today. So many people have been saying, oh, when is he going to return? When is he going to return? He's already returned a whole bunch of times. And quite frankly, is around today. Whether one believes it or not, this is the truth. So this is something to think about. But the point of this episode is that we are all progressing. Whatever we may do, there's a consequence. So do right action. But ultimately, you must free yourself, free your mind and heart from the binds of anger and frustration. You can't make yourself feel love, but you can learn to be in that place, to live in that space. And then from there, what radiates from you is good. And a light bulb that's lit can light the way for many. So if this planet, which has been in darkness, is coming out of a very dark time, especially in the terms of its spiritual development, we've progressed in many ways. But our advancement in the field that I'm talking about is making a great leap forward now. And so all the divisions and all the problems that we're experiencing, they've been here before. We're going to come out of it. We're going to succeed. There's good guidance in the world. But life is a journey from that small life, being stuck in this little space, this little body, to being connected to all, to feeling everything that is literally part of you. How much love is in the universe? Billions and billions of galaxies. You think there isn't other stuff out there? There is. Think about that. How much energy is in the universe? How much compassion, how much love, how much enthusiasm, really? How much grace, absolutely beyond anything anybody could ever imagine. And when we get connected to that, then we become a river of that, to the extent we can hold that force. And so Jesus was an individual who was trained and was christened. And that christening brought in that great consciousness for a short period of time. A little job needed to be done to bring relief to the world, and then he moved on. And I'm going to talk about that, how that happened. So invite your friends, come back. Listen to the next episode. We'll talk about how this progresses, because we're coming to the time that became the core of Christianity. He wasn't here to create a religion. All of that happened later. And all the great teachers would say the same thing. Buddha was not here to create Buddhism. All of that happened later. And the divisions came up later also. So again, this is Dr. Jim Weldon, also known in the East as Yogadi. It's the name I was given in a mysterious way. Inviting you back. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this. It's something to think about, because we're talking about your life. Such beings, they want nothing. They're only there to give, because they get more fulfillment in giving. You don't think the inspiration comes in my body when I begin to experience and see some of these events? And I see the repercussions, the ripples that went out from this example of Judas. What happened the next time, 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 on and on to this day. We make mistakes. And when it's over, if we've done the inner work, we're already connected to the space beyond this life, and leaving it is nothing. Nothing. You open a door, you go out, you have a party with your friends, you celebrate for a little while, you make a plan, you get back in line, and you come back. There is an ultimate state, for sure. But it doesn't mean the journey ends there. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.